Hello, everybody. My name is Jim Farmer. I'm the festival director of Out on Film, Atlanta's LGBTQ Film Festival. Landmark Theaters is hosting a retro replay Pride series in June with Hedwig and the Angry Inch, June 11th, Moonlight, June 18th, and But I'm a Cheerleader on June 25th at 9 landmark locations throughout the country, including the Midtown Art Cinema here in Atlanta. I am honored to be talking to Stephen Trask, responsible for the iconic music and lyrics of Hedwig, a film that means so much to me professionally and personally. Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
It is such an honor to get your email and like be able to do this. How did Hedwig come up?
Oh, John and I had been we were accidental friends. We met on a plane. I moved my seat to sit next to him. We've told this story a lot. And then we kept in touch after that plane ride. I had his phone number and I would call him every now and then and we would just chat on the phone. And then I'd lose, then a few months would go by and then we kept on having friends in common that we didn't know we had in common and kept running into each other until we started hanging out just the two of us and I had been trying to get him to come see my band for some time, and one of our accidental mutual friends, someone that he had been a camp counselor for at an arts camp, like I don't know, a decade earlier, um, uh, brought him to one of my shows. I had been dropping off flyers for my band to the theaters where John was performing, to try and get him to come see the band, and then he eventually came and kind of knew right away he wanted to work with me. And it was at the same time that I was looking for a collaborator. I was
Okay.
working with an opera singer, and I was working with someone who's doing um, um, bossa nova influenced jazz music, and I had this band, and John, it just felt like a really good fit when we started talking. And John had a project about a rock star that he was working on that was more or less autobiographical. Um, and I mean, the rock star was literally named John, and it was more or less autobiographical. And he wanted it to have this theme of where does love come from Plato's Symposium, from this story in Plato's Symposium. Um, and he bought me that book, and he gave me a couple of scenes from this show that he was working on, neither of which um, is in Hedwig, but one of them ended up in something else that he did, because the John character became Tommy, and Tommy ended up not really being in the show. And we were working for a time, and John told me a story about a woman who'd been a babysitter for his family, who lived in a trailer park in Junction City, Kansas, and who was um, East German, um, uh, um, former army wife, but divorcee, who turned tricks out of her trailer. And John told me this story about her, and I was like, you need to perform. This has to be, one, she has to be a character, and two, you should perform her in drag. And three, if you do perform her in drag, we can get her working at Squeeze. We can get her workshopping at Squeezebox, where I'm the music director, and we had drag queens. And four, let's make her into someone who used to perform with this rock singer, who is still named John at the time, back when he was unknown, back when he was a teenager, and she kind of writes his songs and creates his persona, and then he runs off to become a rock star, and she's left bitter and singing in dives. And he was like, "Great!" And he just latched onto that. And meanwhile, he had told me to write a song based on this story from Plato's Symposium, and those were just, I think, those were two really big asks of each other. Uh, and because John had never done drag, and and I don't think he had any intention of doing drag, um, and to sort of create this character that would be a drag character and add on these fictional elements. And it was, it was a lot for him to undertake. And as was writing a song based on that story from Plato's Symposium to try and make it sound like a natural song that someone might write and put on an album, regardless of whether it had to do with a musical. And so we kind of really latched onto these ideas, and we also were really into, you know, we had a lot of musical ideas that we shared, and I had this love of Lou Reed, who was very influential on my approach to the lyrics. I mean, the lyrics are like, if the lyrics are to have two parents, one of them is Lou Reed and the other is John Lennon, and depending on what it is I'm trying to tell. Um, and we had these long, just a lot of long, uh, like symposia, like just on various subjects that mattered to us, and a lot of those subjects, we got very into talking about different dualities, like communist and capitalist, and male and female, and top and bottom, and dominant and submissive, and capitalist communist, and all sorts of dualities that Hedwig might embody. And um and this really just informed how we approached writing, the philosophy behind the writing of the show. And I think one of the first things I said to John, I was very taken with this with Sandra Bernhardt's "Without You I'm Nothing," which, you know if you look at it, I mean, in one way, if you look at it, it's a drag act, right? Like, she's doing a drag act, but she's female, but she's doing a drag character, and the model of the show um, is is a sort of drag model. Taking songs and monologues that lead up to songs. And I loved the way, like, especially with the Burt Bacharach song, the Burt Bacharach section, but there are other sections too. The monologue and the monologue was really, really interesting, and the way that her monologue made you really understand more about the Burt Bacharach, Hal David, Dionne Warwick collaboration, the way they fed into each other, was very inspiring to me, because to me, like, when I go see musicals, every musical was just like the book just served leading into the song. Um, and then the song told the story, but they didn't necessarily add, like, the song make didn't necessarily add to the book. Do you know what I mean? Like, but somehow this they seemed to gain from each other in ways, and there were and her monologues were sort of standalone monologues. And I said, let's do something that's like Sandra Bernhardt's movie, or "Without You I'm Nothing," but instead of cover songs, it'll be all original songs. And instead of individual essays that lead into the original songs, we'll have one story arc.
Mhm.
And he was really into that idea, and because he was a big fan too. And so that work really informed informed where we were going, and our approach to that storytelling.
Exactly. I'll never forget, I had just moved to Atlanta in 1998, and my roommates had gone to New York and came home raving about this show. It's like, I gotta go see that. I didn't get a chance to see it in New York, but I obviously did see it later. But when you brought this to off Broadway, did either you or John have any idea of the impact it was going to make?
You know, yes and no. Like idea, you always have a fantasy, right? You always have a
Exactly.
fantasy. Like every single band what like has the desire to be the biggest band in the world, right? Or to be like super, like everyone wants to be super popular. They want to be recognized. So of course you fantasize about it, and you have an idea of what it might look like. It never ends up actually looking like the thing that you thought. Um, but at the same time, there's no expectation of it, and it was so hard for us to find an audience, um, that sometimes it felt like it was never really going to break through. It was very difficult for us to um, it was very difficult for us to get to a point where we could continue running the show without losing thousands of dollars a week, which if that had kept on happening, the show just would have closed. And we were basically saved by a Time magazine review, and that 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 saved the show, that review, and it was many weeks into the run. And I think the week before it came out, we had lost $17,000, which doesn't sound like a lot
A lot.
given the way theater budgets are now, but we had an operating budget of $35,000 a week. 37 if it was like a really special time and we did extra advertising and we could get it down to like 32 if we really needed to. And and the whole show cost $300,000. It was not so to lose $17,000 is a big was a was a really big deal. Like we had, like, they called us in for a meeting. um they called John and me in for a meeting, and they were going to try and find the money to keep the show going, but they wanted to show us that they had $45 left in the bank and that we'd lost $17,000 the week before, and they were going to figure it out, but they just wanted us to know we're losing $17,000 a week and we have $45. And they were like, but we are committed to keeping this open. And then the Time magazine review came out, and it was just like, okay, thank you. Just like literally changed overnight. Um, yeah. So then it became, and so then I remember saying to my dad at some point, I think in some way this show's going to be part of my life for the rest of my life. It'll probably be the main thing that is like whatever I do, even if I have things that are more, that are seen by more people or that make me more money, this will be the thing that'll be always in my life. And he said, yeah, I'd say that. He was pretty blunt about it.
This became a film pretty, I mean, not long after 2001. When did you and John realize that this would indeed be a film?
We kind of wanted it to be a film right away, and after, I will say that Time magazine thing just changed everything for us. We were already very celebrated in New York, and people thought we were this, over the top hit, but it was only because, like, when David Bowie came to see the show, David Bowie and Amon and Isabella Rossellini came as a party, right, one night, and the night that they were there, and it was like a Thursday or a Wednesday, right, and the house was packed, all 258 seats were taken with screaming fans, not one of whom paid to get in, right? It was just like, or maybe like 15 people paid to get in, and everyone else was just like they'd been given a ticket. It was like, please come. And then we invite the press, and they're like taking pictures of that very famous party, and they're like, at the runaway hit show, blah blah blah. But it wasn't. It was like, and then we went back to losing, $10,000 a week the moment they left. But people thought we were a hit, and our because the publicists, because the publicity people, uh, um, 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 were so, Tom D'Ambrosio and James, were so good at their jobs, they made everyone think we were this enormous hit, which made record companies come and film companies come. And it was just one record company and one film company after another thinking, we have to get in on this. We have to get in on this. We have to get in on this. And so that spring and that summer, we were just taking meetings with film companies and pitching ourselves. And, and I had a personal connection to New Line Cinema because my uncle was their started their distribution company, and so we chose New Line uh, because my uncle was there, and they weren't the only ones that wanted us, but the personal connection and the fact that you would actually have. So I would actually have someone in my family in charge of distribution and marketing, and then we made the movie, and then AOL. This, I mean, it seems like such an upside down world, right? But like AOL bought Time Warner, and they fired everybody, including my uncle. And so by the time we opened, in fact, while we were at Sundance winning all of these awards, we were with our three producers there. They all got fired while we were there during the festival. And one of them got fired. We were walking down the street at Sundance, and this person who's just a kind of sort of odious person, oh, I think is still at New Line, called up our last remaining producer while we're walking down the hill at Sundance and said, first of all, I just want to congratulate you on what a huge success you're having with Hedwig at this festival. It is the hit of the festival. That said, if it were up to me, I still wouldn't make this picture. And I'm sorry, we're going to have to let you go. Like, I mean, I don't know exactly. I know that we still wouldn't make this picture. Congratulations on your hit, but I still wouldn't make this picture if it were up to me. And then you're fired. All happened while we were walking, and it was not a longer than 4-minute phone call. So, like, I don't know exactly. She was like, "Well, I just got fired," and then we went and had like later that night we had a celebratory dinner with all our fired producers, and my uncle had just been fired. Like, so we didn't have anybody looking out for us when it came out, like nobody, and they downgraded us from New Line to Fine Line. It was just it is what it is, you know.
This is the portion of the Zoom where I fanboy out. Hedwig has had such a tremendous effect on me personally and professionally. I'm a film critic. I'm a film festival, LGBTQ film festival director, and Hedwig is one of my favorite films of all time. I'll never
Thank
forget
you.
the first time I saw the film, and I know a lot of people who remember when they saw Hedwig and the impact. But God, I could talk to you for hours. But can you talk about Hedwig's lasting power and why it means so much to people, and why it's so iconic, why people are still crying about it and talking about it so long after it debuted, and people who've seen the film over and over and never get tired of it and always love seeing it and love finding new things about it.
There's a few things, and one is there's like and this I'll actually say comes from the John Lennon side of things, which is, you know, he somehow found a way to make pondering big ideas very accessible,
Mm-hmm.
while at the same time, in his best work, never seemed to be closing off the conversation. It wasn't like, here's a big idea and this is the way the world works, was rarely the thing. It was always playing the mind game, the mind gorilla forever, pushing the barriers of peace and love, of, it, it, it was a very expansive view that could encompass a lot of ideas. And I took that approach. I feel like the discussions that John and I had, um, that we weren't looking to come up with answers. We were looking to have conversations that with each other that would then inform the piece without, like, the conclusion of the show is Hedwig finding wholeness,
Mhm.
but the the philosophical issues that that make Hedwig feel not whole, all of those various philosophical, all of those various divides, um um like we never personally said, and here's the answer. So I think that the show can evolve with people because it was kind of made to. It was kind of made to be part of a conversation. Not It's not a lecture. It's part of a conversation. Um, and we were also very conscious of, you know, I, like, in some ways, John and I were each telling our own stories through Hedwig. So we were being very personal, but at the same time, it became her story.
Yeah.
And so you make her story, but it's also his story and it's also my story. And then you try and tell it in a way that's very humanizing so that I think a lot of people can find their own personal story in it.
Mhm.
And we found that from the very beginning, people, uh, like, a, a very wide range, unexpectedly wide range of people would say, sometimes I think I am Hedwig. And you'd be like,
Exactly.
but you're an 84-year-old married man with 4 kids and 8 grandchildren. Like, how are you? Like, but we had so many people say, and then sometimes someone would be like, oh, John met uh, a trans woman who was a mayor of a town in East Germany. And she's like, I feel like I am Hedwig. And you're like, well, that makes sense, right? Like, like that would make sense. But then somebody came up to me. She's like, oh, my mother escaped the Civil War in El Salvador on foot, walked through Central America on foot, came into this country, got her citizenship, and teaches elementary school. And she's 50, whatever now. And she starts every day by singing Tear Me Down, and she says to me, I am Hedwig. Like, it, you know, and I get it because she did everything she could to climb over a wall and to reinvent herself and to find, like, fulfillment in her life in a way that, like, she put everything on the line. But she literally listens to Tear Me Down every day and proudly proclaims, I am Hedwig.
Wow.
um
That
so
is that is so amazing because I think so many of us, especially in the queer community, um, we can so relate to Hedwig as an outsider, someone who is trying to, discover who we are and where we're going and moving forward and the layers and just there's so much that's amazing about Hedwig. But I have to ask you specifically, Stephen, because oh my god, I'm gonna cry. The music of Hedwig just penetrates to my soul. I mean, when I think of Wicked Little Town and Origin of Love and Midnight Radio, I mean, these are songs that I sing by myself sometimes in my office, and they still have such impact on me. But I mean, this music, where did this music come from?
so where did it come from? Like, it came from doing a lot of listening, a lot of playing, and trying to be very open.
Mhm.
And by open I mean being very aware when I started creating something that felt like it was coming from inside, and recognizing, oh, this is special enough to be in Hedwig. And very often it came to me like it came to me in bursts. And so a lot of it was, oh, I just got a huge burst, and I wouldn't necessarily be around pen and paper or an instrument. So like just printing it on a piece of paper in my mind and playing it over and over again in my mind. I had so many rhymes, so many stanzas, so many melodies and chord progressions that came to me on subways and taxi cabs while walking around New York, that I just had to like imprint in myself before I could get to some place to get them down. And of course, like it was before you had like digital audio workstations, or you had like now if I have an inspiration, I just pull out my phone and I do a voice memo. And I have like, I have like, how many voice memos do I have? I have 2,425 voice memos. I actually don't think that that's all of them, but like, and so many of them are the starts of songs, and like I don't even know how I'm going to go back and find them. But like, this was like, you had to really like keep it in your head, like, and not that it's the most special number or whatever, but like, Hedwig's Lament, every single word and every single chord and every single note of the melody was written in a taxi cab on the way to a rehearsal with John, Miriam Shore, and Peter Askin. And I walked in the room and they started talking to me, and I remember just saying like, I can't talk. I need a piano right now. I have something I have to get out. And they were like, there's a piano in the next room. And I went to the next room and I started kind of trying to find the starting note, and I found it and I just played it out. Like I just kind of knew what it all was. And I went in the next room and played it for them. Um, but like literally the whole thing was just in my head. Um, and, um, yes, like, you just have to, um, those kinds of bursts. Like the whole opening stanza of Origin of Love was written while walking, and then I got it memorized and I ran back home and wrote it down.
Thank you. As on so many levels. Hedwig and the Angry Inch plays June 11th at the Midtown Art Cinema and several other landmark theaters across the country as part of the Retro Replay Pride. Moonlight is June 18th, and But I'm a Cheerleader is June 25th. Stephen, I can't begin to tell you how much it's meant to talk to you, and thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you for this iconic work that still resonates so strongly now as it did when it opened. On behalf of so many of us in the queer community, thank you so much for this.
Thank you. Have a great day and have a great festival.
Thanks so much.
All right.